Let's have a think about some of the changes that are upcoming in the market. And we've already heard about a few of the new services that are likely to hit the UK and other European markets in the near future. So where do they sit? How are UK consumers spending on media? And what does it all mean for the industry? So let's start at a high level. Let's start looking at the amount of money that consumers spend in the UK. And the average UK consumer spends rather a lot on media. So every year, a typical UK person will spend over £200 buying DVDs, going to the cinema, subscribing to pay TV, paying their TV licence, and a whole host of other discretionary media activities. So they spend a lot. And in fact, if we look worldwide, the average UK consumer is one of the top spenders on media, behind only the US. So UK consumers spending well above many of their peers in other markets worldwide. And that number, despite some of the doom and gloom surrounding the industry and the pressures that's being faced, has been increasing. So if we look over the past 15 years or so, we can see, well, actually, that number's gone up from about £166 per year back in 2005, all the way up to over 200 in 2019. If we dig down into the amount that your typical consumer spends on the different products during your average year, you can see how that market has shifted over the last 10 years. So back in 2009, very much dominated by subscription pay television services like Sky. Public TV, we've got the BBC TV licence, and that's split across typically multiple people in the household. And then we've got home entertainment and theatrical at the top there. Now, home entertainment, as we know, has been a slightly shrinking media, but subscription video on demand has more than picked up the slack, and it's also picked up some of the slack that we've seen in public service broadcasting. So consumers in the UK are ploughing more money into their media services than ever, even if some of us don't necessarily feel that they are. And we can see that being reflected in activities. We saw some of these in the GfK presentation earlier, and we can see those in our own statistics. So this is what internet users are doing, what services they have access to, what their behaviours look like. So on a monthly basis, we can see that typically people are actively watching catch-up TV in the middle, and that's going up. That's from the traditional broadcasters. Public service broadcasters on the left-hand side going down a little bit, so from 89% to 85%, but still the majority of people are engaging with a BBC or an ITV on a regular basis. We've got some slight slowdown in pay TV, slight pickup in subscription online video, and cinema roughly stable, if not slightly up. But the other thing you might notice about this chart is that if you added up all of these in your head, you'd get to about 400%. So, of course, a typical consumer is not just using one form of media, they're combining multiple types of media. And that leads to an extremely fragmented and complex landscape that the existing service providers, the broadcasters and the players need to navigate, but also the new service providers and the broadcasters will need to navigate. So how do the consumers break down? Who's doing what? Well, if we take 4 of those areas, pay TV, subscription video on demand, cinema going, and home entertainment, and say, well, how do they all intersect? You get a slightly complex looking chart, so let me explain this one. So each one of these bubbles represents a combination of those 4 different behaviours. So the top set of bubbles running across left to right, where we've got the little cinema going icon, those people all go to the cinema over a typical 6-month period. Within that, on the second column there, you can see how it breaks down for home entertainment usage. So the little DVD symbol, they're either using or buying DVDs or going to iTunes or equivalents or not. And you can see that. And on the vertical lines, we can see subscription video on demand or no subscription video on demand. So do they have Netflix or do they not? And pay TV, do they have Sky or Virgin or BT or do they not? And so each of those bubbles represents where those behaviours intersect. The top left, the biggest bubble of them all, are people combining all 4 media types. So 22%, just over a fifth of the UK population has pay TV. They have subscription video on demand. They buy home entertainment. So they're buying DVDs or buying or renting online. And they go to the cinema. So all of these behaviours are occurring at the same time. And of course, you've got a whole range of different combinations. There's another popular combination bottom left, and that's people with pay TV and subscription video on demand, but they're not going to the cinema or not buying DVDs. And of course, right the way down the bottom right-hand corner, you've got about 7% of the population there that aren't engaging with any of these forms of paid media. In fact, they're typically watching commercial broadcast or effectively watching ad-supported services, maybe online at the catch-up services or YouTube. So a whole array of different behaviours. But each one of these has a different value attached because each of those products costs a certain amount of money and some of them are more expensive than others. So if we translate that through, that fifth of consumers, that 22%, is responsible for well over a third of all UK discretionary media spending. So a significant amount of money is spent by a relatively small proportion of the UK population. And in fact, when you take into account those top two bubbles, so effectively cinema goers, pay TV subscribers, and subscription video on demand customers, people with all three of those, you've got about 31% of consumers responsible for about half of all media spend. And if I'm being perfectly honest here, because this is partly based on an online panel, we're missing some of the oldest consumers in the market who are going to be more likely to be free-to-air consumers. So in fact, I would wager that that's significantly above 50% of spend if we take that into account. But now I'm going to tell you, while this is interesting, it's almost entirely useless for certain services. And the reason is as follows. Let's take that 35%. Who are they? I mean, because they seem like a particularly good segment of the market to target. If you're a new player entering the market, they've got all the money, they're spending on the services, let's go after them. And indeed, you'll get some results that will tell you, well, they're interesting. I mean, they're younger. 74% of them are aged under 44, so they're much younger than average. They're high income. Over half of them are in households earning over $40,000 per year. They're in larger households, so they've got kids in the family typically. So they're in big households, lots of money, and they're younger, perfect demographic target, early adopters. Except when we look at their behaviours, they're not one segment at all. They're many segments. They have diverse content preferences, so no two consumers are quite alike, and it shows up in terms of the genres that they favour. Some of them like crime, some of them like horror. What drives them to take out a subscription? What drives them to take pay TV or take a subscription video on demand service? Some of them like sport. Some of them like the functionality that Sky Q brings. And of course, some of them like bundled services. They're just getting some of these services because they've got a broadband package with a certain ISP. And last but not least, the locality of the content. Many of them like US TV content. They rate US TV channel content higher than average. They rate the BBC, but they don't like Channel 4 or ITV quite so much. So where do they stand on UK content? So it's a very puzzling group. And you can see this as a microcosm when you look at individual service providers and who their potential audiences are. So let's take Disney+. So Disney+ launching in Europe as we speak, launch in the UK TBC. Now Disney+, you'd think, well, it's got a certain type of content. It's going to skew to a very specific demographic group. It should be fairly easy to profile. But if we think about how Disney+ profiles, actually they have multiple audiences within them. So these two bubbles here represent two of Disney's core audiences, those aged 18 to 24 and those with children. And these are entirely separate audiences. They're not overlapping and they have distinct content preferences. So the 18 to 24s like the Marvel titles, the older consumers with kids like the animated titles. And those who aren't in this bubble, the older consumers still, they like Star Wars. So even within one service with a targeted group, consumers prefer different types of content. If we think about the international targets for Disney, Disney needs to hit about 40 to 50 million subscribers outside the US. So let's call that 10% of households, about 2.6 million subscribers. But if we look at where Disney Plus is profiling at the moment, their catalogue, about 1,000 titles, it's going to be much, much smaller than any of the other services in the market right now. So really needing to power through the strength of its original catalogue. And that's going to be the key battleground over the next few years for many of the service providers. There are 500 brand new TV titles in production as it stands from these streaming players alone, so Netflix, Disney+, Apple TV. And those will be hitting the market over the next 6 to 18 months. 500 brand new, never seen before shows. Now spend's growing, and so people are willing to spend more. But a small number of consumers are responsible for the vast bulk of spending as it stands. And that high spend group that is responsible for all that spending is actually quite diverse. It's extremely fragmented in terms of their preferences. So understanding that is going to be crucial for the success of any of the new services hitting the market. So with that, I'm going to finish, and hopefully we'll have time to discuss on the panel. Thank you.